This video will be complete garbage. There's no other way to put it. It's supposed to look pretty. There is no way to be fully historically accurate. The greatest empire in human history is entirely lost to humanity. I have failed. I have failed. No. Go Who's. This is the start of the scientific renaissance, of the scientific revolution. They're renovating the apartment downstairs, and so if I don't do this fast enough while all of the people doing the renovations are off on lunch break, then this video will be complete garbage. But we're gonna get right into it. The stakes are high. Okay, so I'm gonna be looking at Assassin's Creed Mirage from a historian's lens. What are their sources? Who are they consulting? Are they getting it right? Are they getting it wrong? Are they being respectful of the cultural heritage? So much of not just like Middle Eastern history pivots on ancient Baghdad in the 8th century and the 9th century, but so much of world history and world culture comes directly out of Baghdad in this period. But let's just get right into it, because I've talked long enough.
Assassin's Creed Mirage is set in 9th century Baghdad, at a time when the city...
Okay, I'm already pausing right here, because this is what I'm already off to a great start. This is what I'm looking for. Baghdad was first created by Abu Ja'far, or his regnal name was Al-Mansur, who was the second Abbasid Caliph. When it's first created, it's a planned city. It was designed by the architects and the city planners to be a geometrically perfect circle encompassed by walls. It was designed from the ground up to be aesthetic and to look pretty. There's no other way to put it. It's supposed to look pretty. It's an amazing capital city for what they want to picture as the greatest empire in human history. This is a huge empire. They want an amazingly perfect capital. This is the Baghdad from movies like Aladdin, like Disney's Aladdin. This is the real life setting that all of these cultural images of ancient Islamic stories come out of. This is why it's so cool to have an Assassin's Creed game and why it fits so well. It's one of the most amazing times and places in all of world history.
We started our research on Baghdad very early on, and the more we learned, the clearer...
Oh, wait, I love this. I love this so much. So, I'm actually really curious about this because when we talk about Baghdad, we almost always only talk about the round city right here. Of course, not everyone could fit in that city. The population of Baghdad was in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even in the millions at this point at its height. So I'm super curious about how they depict all of these people living in the sectors of the city on the other side of the river over here. And it seems like they're depicting, at least in this concept art, a wall around both the inner city, but also around the broader city. And so I'm really curious about not just like the accuracy, but like how they depict the interaction between the people who are living in the broader city and the people who are living, probably almost certainly the wealthy and the nobility, living in the inner city. I'm sure that like they consulted with historians and this is as accurate as we can imagine, but not really anything survives from Baghdad from this period. So there is a certain amount of creative liberties you have to take, and this seems like a very logical one to take.
It became that this city was a perfect setting for our game. Unlike previous Assassin's Creed games, almost nothing from the time period has survived to the present day.
Yeah, I was just saying, yes, that's absolutely true. What most people think of when they hear Baghdad today is they think like the war in Iraq or Saddam Hussein's regime, modern day Iraq, which has gone through a lot of political turmoil in recent history in Baghdad. But when we're talking about the loss of this era of history, that ends in the 1300s with the Mongol invasion. So the Mongols, on their march to the west across the Eurasian continent, they got to the city of Baghdad, and when it doesn't surrender, they siege it. And the Mongols, they destroyed everything. They absolutely erased this entire city as it existed back then to our knowledge from existence. Of course, their scholars survived. The Mongols were actually very good about patronizing scholars from the places that they conquered, and basically saying, you can either come and be our scholars or you can die horribly in a siege. And so some of the things did survive. Also, a lot of the records and the cultural works survived because there were copies in places like Egypt, other places around the world, and especially around the Islamic world. So some things survived, but the vast majority of things did not. One of the biggest challenges with recreating a setting like Baghdad is there is no way to be fully historically accurate because most of it doesn't exist. Most of it is entirely lost to humanity.
We still wanted to be sure to do everything we could to be respectful of the culture and history of the city.
We had to give our art team the freedom to recreate Baghdad from scratch with nothing but the historical information we had from the time period. Like Guy Lestrange books, Baghdad during the Abbasid Caliphate, but also description by medieval travelers, archaeological findings from neighboring cities, and other buildings from the time that are still standing.
I love that they highlight this because when people ask, what do historians even actually do? It's this. This is what historians do all day. We're going to places and archives and reading stuff from the time and taking what archaeologists do, where they look at the physical remains of people left and the physical things that they leave behind, and we're putting this into a broader picture to create a narrative and an idea of what it would be like to experience this a specific time and place. Actually, this is very similar to the kind of work that I did for my Banquet of Blood video, which is up here in the cards. But that video, I spent a lot of time not just like reading the history of the Abbasid revolution and the reasons behind the Banquet of Blood, but looking at primary source documents, pictures and paintings, comparing that to Islamic feast traditions in order to not just like say, oh, they invited these people here and killed all these people, like to actually break down what the actual plot was like, what the banquet would have been like. That took a lot of work that doesn't get put on camera, doesn't end up in the history books, but is very interesting, incredibly interesting to history nerds like me.
But we weren't alone on this journey. We worked with experts, like Dr. Claire Anderson, specialist in Islamic art and history during the Caliphal period, who helped us with the world art, or Dr. Raphael Whalen, Ubisoft Montreal historian.
Okay, so this is one of the things that I love about this video. They not only are talking about the things they did as a studio to create this past, but they're naming the historians that they consulted in order to bring this game to life. That is a testament to how seriously Assassin's Creed is taking their responsibility to this history. And so, of course, I did my research to see who are these professors, who are these historians that they're talking about. And so this guy, Dr. Whalen, he is their in-house historian and expert and consultant, which is great because you need a dedicated historian to help parse through all of the primary source material, secondary sources, understand what's true, what's not true, what's half true, how to depict it in a respectful way, and that's their full-time job. I love that they hired a dedicated person for that, but also, Dr. Claire Anderson, she's an expert in Islamic art, especially during the Caliphal period. And by the Caliphal period, I mean the era from the Rashidun Caliphate, which is like the caliphate immediately following the life of the Prophet Muhammad, all the way until the end of the Abbasid Caliphate when the Mongols invade and destroy Baghdad. That's really the end of the Abbasid Caliphate. And the renovators are back. I have failed. No. Also, I have to shout it out. She got her master's degree at the University of Virginia, and that's where I went to school. And so I just had to say, go Who's. I'm so happy to see a fellow Wahoo out there changing the world, making video games. She sounds like an amazing person, and I would love to talk to her and interview her about her work here. So, comments. Down below, let me know if I should reach out to Dr. Anderson for an interview. That would be amazing. I really apologize for the stupid construction happening below me. Sometimes I live in an apartment where they're banging on all of the walls all the time, and it sucks.
Abbasiyeh is the cultural hub of Baghdad, where you can find the House of Wisdom. This is where scholars, philosophers, scientists, and astronomers gather and transmit knowledge from the entire empire and beyond.
So this is one thing that I am very excited for. When historians are talking about 9th century Baghdad, this is one of the biggest things we're talking about. The advancements coming out of the House of Wisdom, the works in the arts and the sciences coming out of Baghdad during this time are the basis of things like mathematics, geometry, astronomy. This is the start of the scientific renaissance, of the scientific revolution, at least a phase of it. Science and the human understanding of the world and the way the world works around us is advancing at a rapid rate, and it's happening in Baghdad. Aspects of what we call algebra dates way back before this time period, at least as early as the ancient Greek period. The name algebra comes from a mathematics textbook by Al-Khwarizmi, who wrote about how to solve formulas and different uses for formulas during this time period. And a lot of what Al-Khwarizmi and a lot of other mathematicians in this period are doing is reading and interpreting and translating old Greek texts, building on those ideas in different ways, putting different ideas together and trying their own experiments. Later on in the Enlightenment era, and even more recently, mathematicians around the world, especially in the Mediterranean world, adapt the ideas from Baghdad to create more modern understandings of what looks more like what we learned today in the classroom as algebra. But the name, which comes from Al-Jabir, or the reunion of broken parts, that name, Al-Jabir, algebra, gets transmitted from this time all the way through the modern day. So if you've struggled in algebra class, you can thank ancient Baghdad. Wait, that doesn't sound good. Continue.
The market district of Kah, where large crowds gathered to do business, bargain, or trade goods from China, Constantinople, and Spain. The industrial district of Arbiyeh is
Oh, okay. Almost everyone has heard of the Silk Road. It is a network of trade routes connecting China all the way through Europe. So it connects the entire Eurasian continent. So Baghdad obviously is a huge center for the Silk Road. Everything has to go through here. It is a major port of entry for goods across the world. One thing that I do want to talk about with the Silk Road is, it's not really a misconception, but one thing I see a lot is people, they hear, oh, it's a road that goes from China to Europe, and they think that people are, going from China to Europe and then going back, and it's like one road. In reality, it is a complicated network of many different trade routes, and it's mostly based off of relay trade. So silk that's produced in China is taken by a traveling merchant from China to Samarkand, and it's traded in Samarkand, and it's taken by another merchant all the way to Baghdad and traded, and it goes all the way to Constantinople and traded, and then that's how you get it over to places like Rome or Paris, or vice versa. Or if you're talking about like salt or gold from sub-Saharan Africa, that is getting traded up through Egypt and then getting dispersed. You're not having huge amounts of Chinese traders hanging out in Rome, for example, but it is probable that some like native-born Chinese people ended up in a city like Baghdad, maybe even settled, but they would definitely be a vast minority of the people in the city.
Is a dense, grimy part of the city, where slavers, orphans, thugs, and workers try to scrape a living.
Okay, so he mentioned slavery in this period. We do, as historians, and I do know quite a bit about what slavery like the famous forms of slavery from this period, but it's also a thing that isn't as prominent in certain respects, and I'll explain what I mean. So, starting in the Abbasid period, actually around the exact same time Assassin's Creed Mirage is set, the caliphs begin to buy enslaved people to serve as a personal mercenary, mercenary group underneath the caliph near Baghdad. And so these are the Mamluks. The other side of the slavery equation when we're talking about this period is the fact that a lot of enslaved people, in fact, I'd probably venture to guess most enslaved people, are not soldiers. I'm very curious how Assassin's Creed depicts like conventional slavery, so to speak, like normal people who are enslaved as house servants or day laborers or agricultural workers. What does slavery look like for those people? I want to see how Assassin's Creed handles the day-to-day aspects of being an enslaved worker.
We're not just exploring a new setting in the Assassin's Creed universe, we're also going to give players the chance to meet some of the key figures in Baghdad at the time. Authenticity and accuracy are always important to us whenever we deal with real-life historical characters, and it's no different in Mirage. We have the Banu Musa, genius inventors of the era, who made massive contributions to the science of mechanics. Of course, in
Awesome. So I'm super excited. I actually looked these guys up, the Banu Musa, because I was very curious. Who are these people and what role are they going to be playing in the story? And so it turns out the Banu Musa are three brothers, Muhammad, Ahmad, and Hassan, who were put in the care of Caliph al-Ma'mun after their father, who was employed by the Caliph, died. The Caliph put them into the Academy of Science to be raised there in Baghdad, and they went on to become famous inventors, mathematicians, engineers, and scientists during their time. They studied a lot of Greek texts and translated and worked with translators to uncover and learn a lot of the advances that happened during the ancient Greek era and in earlier eras of scientific and cultural expansion. And they took those ideas and then brought it to life in the Islamic context. If I had to predict, they're probably going to serve a role similar to Leonardo da Vinci in Assassin's Creed 2, where they're going to be giving Basim a whole lot of different cool tools and interesting inventions to play around with in the game world. It's actually an amazing way to take history and real historical figures and put them into a context and make them central characters in the plot of the game.
We also created the History of Baghdad feature, designed as a throwback to the original codex from the first Assassin's Creed games. Players will have a chance to explore the game world, to learn more about the people, landmarks, and events essential to Baghdad's history. It felt important to share the historical knowledge that went into the making of the game and to accompany the player in their discovery of the city.
I love the codex. One of my favorite things about the first Assassin's Creed games is like kind of this ability to walk up to like a church or a monument and have the little pop-up that says what this is and what the context is. It just helps you feel like you're living in history. And that's always been the draw for me for Assassin's Creed games. So it is really nice to see their commitment to accuracy in the game. It's amazing. I'm super excited. If you are excited for Assassin's Creed Mirage, make sure that you check out my Banquet of Blood video where I talk about how they got rid of almost all of the Umayyads in one night over dinner. I'm Kiwi, and remember, people change, humans don't. See you next time.